Hey guys, welcome back to another video in the Django Foundation series. In this video, we are going to see how to accept custom URL parameters and show the value back in our views or in the templates. So to do this, we are going to first also learn how to write templates for our views. So far we have been returning raw HTTP responses, but this is a very inefficient way of sending, let's say, the HTML responses, right? So I cannot plug in an entirely large HTML string into this and then send it back. So there should be an easier way of doing it. To make this easy and send the responses back, we first have to create essentially a templates folder. And the name of this folder should be templates, and it should be directly inside our application. So my Django app's name is blog, and I have created a templates folder right inside the blog. So make sure that this templates folder spells as is and also is the direct child of the blog folder. And we're going to place all our templates inside this templates folder. So I'm going to go and then add a new file in the templates folder and call it home.html. And in my home.html, I'm going to essentially basically add a basic HTML template. So I'm going to say title, my microblog, and then in the body I'm going to say something very simple like seeker musings, and say my official microblog where I share insights. So I'm just going to save this as a basic template that can be delivered to the front end whenever the home page is accessed. So now I'll go to my views, and now instead of accessing it at the HTTP response, instead of returning an HTTP response, I'm going to use what we've already imported, that is the render function. So render function is a function in the Django that takes in a HTML file and plugs in any values if needed, or it can also simply return an HTML file as well. Render function takes 3 arguments, the first being request, the second being the name of the template, which is home.html for us, and the third being a context, which is essentially a dictionary with the key value pairs of the value that you would like to plug into the template. But in this case, we do not have a value to get plugged in, so I'm just gonna remove that and only pass 2 arguments. So now we have to see what URL endpoint it is. So we have home. I'm just going to get rid of this home and make it available on home page. So great. So now on the home page, we want to see the HTML file that we've written. So I'm going to go back and run my server. And once I run the server on the home page, if I visit the home page, I should now get the HTML file like that just wrote. So we are getting the HTML file that we just wrote, and we can see the title and the h1 tags, etc. So now we have successfully learned how to essentially return a HTML file to the front end. The other thing that I would like to show is how to pass URL parameters. So you might have seen on sites like facebook.com, twitter.com, or any site that has kind of profiles that you can pass URL parameters. Like for example, if you'd like to visit SpecBit's Facebook page, you just go facebook.com/SpecBit, right? Or if you have a username, you can visit your profile by plugging in your username. So now how does Facebook know who's actually visiting the page and what it's supposed to show on that page? So this is done using something called as URL parameters, and we're just going to learn how to define such parameters. So to do that, first thing we need is essentially a view that can handle it. So I'm going to go back to my code base, and I'm going to write a simple function called greet. So for the purpose of demonstration, I'm just going to call a function greet, which will say, hey, whatever name you plug into the URL. So I'm going to say request, and whatever URL parameter gets plugged in is what will be essentially delivered to this function. So since URLs is the one that is going to call our view, it is also the one that passes arguments to our functions. To do that, we have to go to our to function and essentially also priorly define what that parameter is going to be. I'm just going to call it name, and what I'll do here is I'll say return HTTP response, and in this I'm going to plug in the name whatever was received. So to do that, I'll use string interpolation. So I'm going to use F quotes format of string interpolation. I'm going to say hey flower brackets name, and just say how you doing, right? Save this, and now if I go to my urls.py, I can add another URL. So I'm just going to say path, and we are going to make this available at an endpoint called greet/name, and pay attention to this. This is how we are going to add a URL parameter. So to do a URL parameter, you are going to essentially put angle brackets, and then you're going to say what data type it is going to be, which is string, colon, and then you can give this parameter a name. So I'm going to call this parameter name because that's what we are passing at this point, and add a trailing slash. So now the important thing to remember is that the name that you give here and the name that you're defining in your views.py here should be the same, right? If they're different, they're going to be keyword argument that is going to be passed, and the function will not be able to essentially know what value was passed. So you have to make sure that this name and the name that you have defined in the parameters is same. Now essentially I want to connect this thing to the function that we've just wrote, which is the greet function. I have to essentially make sure this is a mistake that a lot of beginners do, is that they use the name of the view and then it does not work. The reason being that you have used the name of the view here, but you have not imported the top. So make sure that you import the name of the function here, and then you can start using it. So now that's all I need to do. And now if I visit my blog and visit the endpoint that we just defined, which is greet slash any name. So if I say vd and press enter, it's going to plug whatever I have passed here into my page, into my response. So if I were to say here, hey Vidyadhar, it would just say, hey Vidyadhar, how you doing? And so this is just essentially a proof that whatever URL parameter we are passing, the view is able to acquire it and then do something with it. So to also understand, you can also go back to views and print the name here. So whenever you do print something, it's going to be available in the console instead of response. So now I'm going to go back and refresh this page, and no changes will be seen here because whatever I passed is being displayed here. But if I now go to my command prompt, you can actually see that Vidyadhar was printed here. So I just want to essentially help you understand that if I pass a URL parameter, I can access that inside the function, and inside this function is where I'm going to write the entire business logic for my program, right? So user visits a particular URL, passes a parameter, that parameter becomes available to me. I'm going to do whatever I want with it, and finally conditionally or unconditionally return a response back to that user in the last statement, right? So I hope you understand through this video how to accept custom URL parameters and respond with HTML or HTTP responses.